Chapter 96, and Xiaoxue's Gift, 1. Inside Research Institute number 14. Zhu Tui, who had just woken up, felt extremely energetic when he opened his eyes. He looked at the time. It was 3 in the morning. He had slept enough. He first went to the other room to look for Xiaoxue. When he saw that Xiaoxue was still asleep, Zhu Tui returned to the room he was in and continued his training. Zhu Tui had carried Xiaoxue to her resting room after she fainted last night. The option of being worse than a beast did not happen. Zhu Tui was still anxious to train. He wanted to know which ability he would obtain after he activated the 2 genetic base points he sensed during his illusory introspective state. Mind power crowd control? Or was it the mental whip? Based on Zhu Tui's experience, the 2 flickering, expanding gray genetic base points must be genetic base points that had not completely mutated despite the stimulation they received after being administered with the Black Crown Bee's genetic transcriptional fluid. However, it was rather difficult to activate these 2 genetic base points. Zhu Tui had concentrated and activated these 2 genetic base points yesterday. However, he did not activate these 2 genetic base points even after he used up all of his mind power. It had to be known that Zhu Tui's total amount of mind power had increased by more than 25%. After he was administered with the genetic transcriptional elixir of the Queen Bee yesterday. Zhu Tui was an experienced fighter. He was not in a hurry. He retrieved 5 bottles of level E energy restoration elixirs from the medical cabinet and prepared them for later use. He would tell Xiaoxue about it later. He tested out his mind power before he entered the meditative state. The surging mind power gave him an indescribable sense of confidence. He gathered his focus and thought. Zhu Tui's eyes lit up. 5. After the enhancement of his mind power, he could now place 5 mental alls at once. Furthermore, compared to before, these mental alls could now move to a certain extent. It could move under the influence of his mind power. It was not fast, but it was a major improvement for Zhu Tui. Zhu Tui had wanted to complement the ability of the mental chain, but the mental chain could not move the mental all, much less send it far away. Currently, Zhu Tui has not discovered a way to use his mental chain in battle. Zhu Tui was a little curious. What exactly was the cool skill that Xiaoxue mentioned about the mind power chain? After consuming a level E energy restoration elixir, Zhu Tui inhaled through his nose and exhaled through his mouth. He entered the illusory introspection and continued to attack the 2 genetic base points. 2.5 hours later, Zhu Tui, who had consumed 5 bottles of level E energy restoration elixirs, had a look of shock. He trained for 3 hours yesterday. The energy supply he got yesterday night was supplied by the level D compound chain energy restoration elixir. 3 hours, coupled with the purity of the level D compound chain energy, was equivalent to 8 to 9 bottles of level E energy restoration elixirs. He had consumed 11 bottles, yet he did not even activate one. This was the most difficult genetic base point Zhu Tui had ever activated. Seeing that Xiaoxue was still sleeping, Zhu Tui immediately entered a meditative state and set an alarm as he felt that his mind power was about to run out. He would recover a portion of his mind power after sleeping for 3 hours, then train for 2 more hours. This was the first time Zhu Tui had engaged in mechanical training. During the second round, Zhu Tui activated one of the 2 genetic base points he had been focusing on. This genetic base point was a dull silver color the moment it was activated. Zhu Tui had a thought. He was not anxious. He continued to train. Not long after he consumed his 13th bottle of level E energy restoration elixir, he felt a piercing pain between his brows. He had activated another genetic base point. It was also a dull silver. An indescribable feeling welled up in his heart the moment he activated both of his genetic base points. Within the radius of his mental senses, his mind power could instantly condense into a unique mental whip. Invisible and substanceless, but those abilities were real in Zhu Tui's mental senses. He lashed out with his mind power. Zhu Tui understood that he had obtained this ability after he activated the 2 faint silver genetic base points. He would not be able to obtain the ability to whip people with his mind power if he only activated these 2 genetic base points. However, these two genetic base points were definitely the key to his ability to whip people with mind power. Zhu Tui suddenly felt someone in front of him the moment he released his mental senses. He opened his eyes to see Xiaoxue. And Xiaoxue, who had slept for a long time, must have recovered. She had even taken a shower. She was glowing and had a youthful aura. Her long legs looked soul-stirring as she stood in front of Zhu Tui. "Miss Anne, you're awake? It's already 3 in the afternoon. I should have slept at 9 last night. I've slept for 17 hours. And Xiaoxue glanced at Zhu Tui after she said her piece. "Were you the one who carried me onto the bed last night?" Zhu Tui nodded gently. "He looked at you for at least 30 seconds after he carried you onto the bed before leaving. His heartbeat should have increased when he carried you." "Ah Huang, you bastard, shut up." The voice of the advanced artificial intelligence, Ah Huang, instantly vanished. Zhu Tui's level 1 rights were not given to him for nothing. "Thank you," and Xiaoxue muttered softly. "Miss Anne, I think I activated the ability to whip people with my mind power." "What?" And Xiaoxue's almond-shaped eyes widened. "Did I hear wrongly? Which means to say that you activated 3 abilities. After being administered with the genetic transcriptional fluid of the Black Crown Queen Bee?" "I think so," Zhu Tui nodded.